When connecting Teesom with a desktop version of QuickBooks, you will need to download the secondary app for the Integrator. If you are a QuickBooks Online user, please leave this video and go watch that tutorial. This video is strictly for the desktop integration. Okay, you can find the instructions for the desktop integration by simply going to the manual. I'm going to click over here. I have the tab already open. And as you can see, it's help.teesom.com/manual. And all I'm going to do right now is click over here and type in the word Integrator. And as you can see, I've searched before, so I'll just click on that and hit search. And you can see the live vendor integration that comes up, the integrating with QuickBooks Desktop, and that's really what we're looking for. So let's go ahead and click on that. And these are the step-by-step instructions on how to download the Integrator, install it, then connect it to Teesom. And we're going to go through all of that in this video. But the first thing I wanted to point out to you is there are two downloads, and I want to explain the difference between the two. So as most of you know, we have a second program called Fast Manager. And if you are switching from Fast Manager over to Teesom and need to download the Integrator, you're going to click here. If you've never used Teesom before, or you've never used Fast Manager before, you're going to click here to download the QuickBooks Integrator. And that's really important that you read through these instructions. Okay, so depending on whichever one, you're just going to click here and it'll begin the download process. Go ahead and double click on the executable file and install the Teesom Integrator, whether it's the light version or the normal one if you're a non-Fast Manager user. Now that you have the Integrator installed, you will need to connect it to Teesom and the desktop version of QuickBooks. So let's go ahead and jump back to our logged in version of Teesom. We're going to click on the main menu, click on Settings, click on Company Setup, click on the Integration tab, and for the desktop version, we're going to go ahead and click on the third-party app integration. As you can see, I already have this connected, but when you first come in here, it's going to be to the off position, and then you'll simply go ahead and turn it on. And then this won't say reset API key. This will actually say connect. And then once you hit the connect button, the Integrator program will then open and it will do its best to actually connect. And let me close out of the Integrator program and open it again just so you can see. So this will actually be blank, and when you're in Teesom, let me jump back to Teesom, and it's given you this API key. You're gonna actually see it over here, and you'll take that API key and jump over to the Integrator and paste it in, and it'll just appear as star, 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 star. And then you'll go ahead and hit the connect button. At this point though, we do need to have QuickBooks open. I have an old version of QuickBooks. I've got QuickBooks Pro 12. So I've got it open, and I now want to allow QuickBooks to connect to Teesom. And so it's going to connect to Teesom first, and then once it realizes it's valid, then it'll do its best to connect to QuickBooks as well. And the reason I say it that way is because the very first time that you connect your Integrator with QuickBooks, it's actually going to come up with a screen that looks like this. And the screen is basically asking you if to allow permissions, basically. So QuickBooks is just, for security reasons, trying to protect your version to not allow anybody to access your QuickBooks. But in this case, we do want Teesom to be allowed to have access to QuickBooks. You'll select the option that says yes whenever this QuickBooks company file is open, and then hit the continue button. And so now that you have Teesom and QuickBooks Desktop connected to your Integrator, it's time to set up the Integrator. Before we set up the Integrator though, I do want to quickly point something out. For security reasons, if you ever do need to reset the API key, all you're going to have to do is click on the reset API key, and then when you go to log into the integrator and it gives you that area here, let me close out of this and show it. So when you log in here, you can actually paste the new API key and then connect it. Okay, there are 5 options at the top of the integrator. So we've got export, and this will allow you to send over the invoices, your customer payments, and purchase orders. And then we've got the sync option, which will allow you to send over customers and suppliers. Now, the reason these aren't together is because in the export option, we're just sending invoices, payments, and purchase orders over. They don't exist in QuickBooks. We're not marrying them up to anything. We're just sending them over. However, the sync option will allow you to look first to see if the customer or the supplier already exists in QuickBooks, and then you just kind of marry it up. Or you can send it over brand spanking new if they've never been created in QuickBooks. Or you can say, look, it exists in Teesom, it exists in QuickBooks, and I want to use the QuickBooks customer because it has the most updated information. So you can sync the customers in that sense. All right, the setup option is where we're going to start. And as you can see, I've already done mine, but I'm going to do my best to explain this. So pretty much when you open this for the very first time, these are all the things that appear on the Teesom side. These are the things that will appear in the item list of QuickBooks that you're going to actually marry up to the items in Teesom. So let me kind of show you the item list in QuickBooks so you get a feel for what I'm talking about. I'm going to jump over to my QuickBooks and I'm going to click on lists, and then I'm going to go to my item list. And so these are things that I've set up in QuickBooks that I'm going to marry up to in Teesom. So for example, here's my apparel. And if I double click to expand that, I can see that it's capturing the cost of goods side. And I can see that it's also capturing the sales side of it. So that item list item is going to allow you to capture both cost of goods and sales if that's what needs to be done. In the case of a tax rate, so let me find my, so here's my no tax option. I just need to say, hey, this is a sales tax item. But on the apparel item, it was actually a non-inventory part. So this is my item list, and some folks who were using QuickBooks as their point of sale or how they were invoicing their customers, they may also have apparel items in here. We're not going to take the time to marry up every single apparel item in Teesom to every single apparel item in QuickBooks. We don't want to do that. That would take a really long time. So what we did in Teesom is we actually have a sales category called apparel, and you're going to want to create an apparel item code in QuickBooks so that we can marry up the apparel sales category to the item list apparel in QuickBooks. I hope that makes sense. Definitely feel free to reach out if you need further explanation on this. So here's my Florida sales tax, and again, it's a sales tax item. It's not a non-inventory item, but it's still something I'm going to marry up in QuickBooks. Let's jump back over to our QuickBooks Integrator, and here's where I've got it. These are all, again, all the things in Teesom, and I need to marry them up with items here in QuickBooks. So non-tax exempt item, all I'm going to do is click on the drop down here and find the option. If the option doesn't exist, guess what? You're just going to go over to QuickBooks and create it in your item list so that it's something that you can marry up here. So for example, I've got a test tax here that I was obviously playing with something, and I haven't married it up with anything, And if I wanted to, I could go into QuickBooks and create that same test tax rate and marry those two up. But I'm just going to leave this as not assigned. It's not a big deal. Okay, same thing with the item tax. This should already be created. I have 3 here in Teesom. Don't worry about this. Really, the only thing you're probably going to need, unless you're somebody from New York and you do have the actual youth tax, you're probably not going to be too concerned about this, but QuickBooks comes with these 2 things already created, and you're literally just going to say, hey, marry the tax up to the tax and marry the non-taxable item up to the non-taxable item. So don't worry too much about this one. On the Terms tab, again, let me see if there was something I didn't have created. No, well, I can tell you I didn't have a 50% deposit and I didn't have a 100% deposit in QuickBooks. I actually had to go create those. And only because it's fresh in my mind, I can tell you where you're going to go do that. It's in the customer and vendor profile list, and then it's the terms list. So you can click on that and you can just come down here and say new and then create the 50% deposit or the 100%. And as you can see, I have things here in QuickBooks that I didn't put in Teesom. So not sure why Consignment is in here, but that was an option that was here in QuickBooks. And the 2%, 10, net 30, that means if they pay within 10 days, they'll get a 2% discount, but they're on net 30 terms. I didn't want those in Teesom, so we didn't create them. So even though they appear in the drop down in the Integrator, I didn't use them because I didn't have them in Teesom. So we just went through and married all these up. And as you can see, I had nothing for 30 days to go to. So I just married it up to the 2% net 30. All right, so you can be sneaky like that too. All right, customer groups. I have silver, platinum, gold, bronze, standard in Teesom. And all I did was say, look, I just want to marry those up to what's called retail. I have 2 options in QuickBooks right now. I have retail and I have wholesale. Oh, I got a few more. So I've got retail, wholesale, referral, and from advertisement. Those were my groups in QuickBooks. I just want to marry them up either to retail or wholesale. So maybe my gold level or my platinum level is my wholesale customer. So I could have married that one up to the wholesale option. Okay, the next tab is our users tab. And again, I have a bunch of test users in Teesom. As you can see, there's so many of them, and we don't care about that. I just want mine, and I want mine married up to the user in QuickBooks. So as you can see in QuickBooks, I only have 2 sales reps created or users in QuickBooks created. And so I just went and married all the garbage ones up to the secondary user. Okay, on the items tab, this is probably the most important tab. This is all your sales categories in Teesom and how they're going to get married up to the item codes in QuickBooks. So as you can see, I have a lot of drilling down that I did, so to speak, in Teesom, but in QuickBooks, I just really want to call it sales. So if I don't do a lot of vinyl or decals or banners, I sell them, but I don't do a lot of them. I just kind of want to send that over as sales. Whereas on signs, I may want to break that down a little bit more and actually have it go to a signs category. So what you're doing here is just deciding whether or not how much you want to drill down on the information is really what you're deciding here. So anything that gets put to the sign category is going to go to the signs sales group or item list in QuickBooks. and so on and so forth. The big one is here is the apparel sales going to apparel, or whatever you called it in Teesom, marrying up to whatever you called it in QuickBooks. And these do not, as you can see, they don't have to say the exact same thing. I'm just basically saying, hey, apparel sales equals apparel in QuickBooks. But this one's a really important one to set up, because if you send information, an invoice, for example, over through the integrator to QuickBooks, and it doesn't find something, so if DTG didn't have any connection to it, then it won't know where to go, and you're obviously going to get an error returned. Okay, let's actually create a sales category in QuickBooks called Scrubs. It's going to be a subcategory of apparel, and then we'll go ahead and marry this up here. All right, so let's jump over here. We're going to go to list. We're going to go to item list, and here's my apparel. And I want to create a new item. It's going to be a non-inventory part, and I'm just going to call it Scrubs. But I'm going to say it's a sub-item of apparel, just like I did with the t-shirts underneath here. Okay? And is this used in assembly? Yes, it is. I'm actually going to buy it as a cost of good, and then I'm going to embellish it, and then I'm going to sell it. So yes, it is used in the assembly. So the expense account is obviously going to go to cost of goods. So let me find my apparel cost of goods, and then my income count is going to be sales apparel. And I'm not putting any prices because it's going to vary every time. So and I do want this as taxable. Again, you would switch that if it's a non-taxable item in your area. Okay, I'm going to just go ahead and hit OK. And let's jump back to the integrator. And I'm going to click the drop down now, and let's see if it finds it if I just type in Scrubs. And there it is. So notice it says apparel : Scrubs. I want to marry this up. So what's going to happen here is it found what I want to marry it up to, and look what it says here. Double click item in the list below to select it. So we're going to double click it, and then it adds it and says the Scrubs are married up to Scrubs. But this in fact is apparel : Scrubs. It's just going to appear here as Scrubs. And we'll go ahead and update. Okay, the rest are pretty easy. As long as you did the first few okay, marrying things up, these are going to be a breeze. Okay, so here are the things I have in Teesom. Here's what I'm going to marry it up to in QuickBooks. So card payment, CIP, click the drop down. Again, if I don't have the option and I want to create something new, I'll have to first go back to QuickBooks, create it, jump back over here, and then link it to the correct thing. And I just went through and married everything up. All right, ship methods, same exact thing. You're just finding the option in the drop down and clicking it. On the supplier groups, same thing. If you're not even using this, you can even just leave this on not assigned if you want it. So not a big deal here. Okay, let's go ahead and hit update. Probably one of the first things I should have talked about before we started setting up is you want to make sure that your name is in the drop down here as the user. So the user for QuickBooks and the user for Teesom. Let's talk about preferences now. I'm going to click on the preference option, and there's 3 tabs here that we're going to look at. So the first one is Invoices, and in the drop down here, you're probably only going to have one option. So all we need to do, the odds of you having 2 accounts receivable accounts is slim, but if you do, you're just going to pick whichever one you want the invoices to go over to. click on Mark Invoices in QuickBooks as printed. If you're using QuickBooks to actually send the invoice to the customer, then I would uncheck this so that it shows up as, hey, you haven't printed this or sent it to the customer, in other words. On the option that says let QuickBooks assign invoice numbers, that's your choice right there. So what you can do is have it use the Teesom invoice number, or you can let QuickBooks generate the next available number. And then on either option of the invoice number, you can always say add this prefix, and you may want to type in TS, so it puts a TS for Teesom to say, hey, this was an invoice coming over from Teesom. All right, the payment tab is this is one option here, and then this is a second option here. You can only pick one of the three in each selection. So either I'm going to say send the card number, the last 4 digits over as the QuickBooks memo on payments, or send payment reference to QuickBooks memo field. I like the payment reference only because you're not always going to have a credit card. Sometimes you'll have a check, sometimes you'll have cash, and I want those payment references to go over. If it is strictly credit cards, then go ahead and select this first option. And I always do recommend sending some kind of payment reference over, although you can choose to not send anything. All right, the next option, again, still talking about payments. I can either apply the payment, or I'm sorry, I can not apply the payment in QuickBooks as I took it in Teesom, which means I will physically have to marry it up to the invoice in QuickBooks. Or I can let QuickBooks apply the payment to existing invoices, or the third option, I want it to apply it the same way I did in Teesom, and obviously that's my preferred method. All right, on purchase orders, same thing with the invoices. Do I want to mark them as printed? And again, if you're doing purchasing from QuickBooks, then I would actually leave this unchecked. If you're doing the purchasing from Teesom, I would probably go ahead and check it. And then same option as the invoice, I can let QuickBooks assign the PO number, or I can choose to have it not assign it and use the Teesom number. And then the prefix, again, I always think this is a good option just so you know which purchase orders came from Teesom. Okay, and go ahead and update. That's very simple preferences. Okay, now that we have the integration going, let's go ahead and send over some things. And actually, I want to start with the sync because I want to make sure the customer's there before I send the invoice. And I want to make sure the invoice is there before I send the payment. So those are the 3 things that are customer related that gets sent over. Your customer, their invoice, and their payment. And they should be sent in that order. So let's go ahead and sync customers, which we're already in. And all I have to do is hit the search button and it's going to find all the customers. But I really only want to look at new customers that were sent over. And look here, I already have everything synced up. I was looking for boxes that had a blank here because on the QuickBooks column, I needed something to be blank so I know to send that over. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to go create a new customer and then show this again. Okay, so I've created my customer. I created an order to make sure I had something in there. I took a payment and I created a purchase order. So we'll have something in every area to send over. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit sync again, hit on customers, and we'll go ahead and use the search option again. And voila, look at my blank box here. And as you can see, it's never been sent over. So I'm going to click to put that at the top. And I'm going to select that option. And do you see what it says here? Double click the item in the list below to edit. So let's go ahead and double click on it. And I have a couple of options. If I think the source is already in QuickBooks, I can come over here and search QuickBooks. So I'm just going to put the word source in here and see if it finds anything. And look, it found a company called Chocolate Source. That's not what we want. We want to, so it didn't find the Source Ministries, and man, did that work out perfect. Didn't know I even had that over there. So, but this actually worked really great to give you an example of, look, you can just put one word of the customer's name and it found something. It's the wrong customer. I don't want to marry it up to that. So I'm just going to hit the send option to send it over to QuickBooks. If I did want to marry it up to this, look what it says. Double click the item in the list below to link it. So if I double click on this, guess what? It's going to take the Source Ministries and marry it up to the Chocolate Source in QuickBooks. And we don't want that. So all we're going to do is hit the send button to send that over. And let's go ahead and jump over to QuickBooks and let's open our customers. And let's do our search for source. And there's the Chocolate Source, and there's the Source Ministries now. If I click on the Source Ministries, you can see all the information that I took in over on the Teesom side is now over here. So I've got their terms, I've got the contacts, email, I've got the phone number, everything's updated here in QuickBooks. But I have no payments and no invoices for this customer yet. So let's jump back to the integrator. And let's go ahead and send that now. So remember, I always want to send the invoices first so that if I did take a payment, then that payment will automatically marry up to the invoice. If I send the payment first, well, now the payment's just going to be in the customer's account and it won't know what to marry up to. So let me go ahead and click on invoices. And same thing, I only want to see anything that's not sent to QuickBooks. You can change this option. Show me all the ones that I have sent to QuickBooks, but in this case, I want the option, show me everything that hasn't been sent to QuickBooks. And I can do it by an invoice range. I can do it by the statuses. Is it at the work in progress? Is it complete? Some people will only ever want to send over completed invoices. Some will do it at both the work in progress and the completed stage. Some will only want to send over paid invoices. It's strictly up to you. All right, so I'm going to leave it on the not sent to QuickBooks and I'm going to click on Get List. And as you can see, I have two invoices here. And I want to talk about the Mark as Sent option. Let's say I'm in my transition period with using QuickBooks all by itself and integrating Teesom with QuickBooks. And I created Leonard Design Group in Teesom, but I've already created the invoice for it in QuickBooks. So then what I would want to do is I would come here and select this invoice here, and I would say Mark as Sent, because I don't want to send a second one over to QuickBooks. I already have it in QuickBooks, so I'm just going to flag this invoice as already being sent. I hope that makes sense. And I'm not going to really do that because I don't have this in QuickBooks. All right, so I can select all to send them both all at once, or let's just do the Source Ministries at once. So you can see the total invoice amount was $3,052.11. I took a down payment of $1,500, or deposit, I should say. And then the balance is $1,552.11. So I'm selecting only the Source Ministries, and then I'll click on this Send to QuickBooks. So this is telling me that not all my sales categories, taxes, or payments are properly cross-matched. So I'll have to go back to the setup and see what is not married up. And as you can see, it's now been sent to QuickBooks and Teesom has been updated. So when I hit Get List again, this line will disappear. So let's go ahead and hit Get List. And you can see that that line is gone. Let's click over on the QuickBooks side of it, and you can see there's the invoice. So let's double click on it to open it. It looks exactly as it did in QuickBooks. And as you can see, the item is apparel. Now again, if you had all your individual styles listed in your item list, you're no longer going to do that. But look at this. You can see in the description line, you can see what the style number was, the color, and the size. So that's pretty cool. And you can see that we did the screen printing there, and everything is awesome. And as you can see, this particular customer was tax exempt, so we can see that what their amount was there. Okay, I'm going to close out of this. 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 Pretty much going to close out of everything in QuickBooks. I'm going to leave QuickBooks open, but close out of everything. I'm going to jump back to the integrator, and this time we're going to export customer payments. And same thing as the invoice option, we want it to be on the not sent to QuickBooks. And as you can see, we can use a date range here rather than an invoice number range. We can use a date range, and you can just hit Get List. There's my one and only payment for the Source Ministries. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. I can select it by putting a check mark there, or I can use the select option and it'll select everything down below. Okay, we're going to go ahead and click on the Send to QuickBooks. It validated, and now look, it was that quick. It sent to QuickBooks and Teesom was updated. So let's jump back over to QuickBooks and let's go to Customers. Let's do the source. Let's just type in that to search it. And let's click on the right company. And so there's our invoice, and here's our payment. If we open the invoice, you'll see that the payment, and sorry, mine's taking a minute to load. You'll see that the payment was applied to the invoice, and actually you can see it down here. So payments applied, $1,500. I do not have to manually marry this up. That's the really cool part, that if I send the invoice first, the payment will get automatically married up to it. And that was part of my preferences setup. Okay, let's go jump back to, Teesom, take the final payment and send that over. So let's go ahead and jump back to Teesom. And here's the order, and I'm just going to go ahead and take another payment, and I'm going to say they gave me another check, and notice it's all automatically defaulting to the balance, and I'll just put in a check number. I really don't want to notify the customer, so I'll just click on Confirm Payment. And now this is a zero balance invoice, and you'll see up here, paid in full. Okay, so now let's jump back to the integrator. Let's click on Get List, and voila, there's the second payment. I'm going to go ahead and select it and send to QuickBooks. Validating, sending to QuickBooks, and it's been updated. I'll click over here to QuickBooks, and look, it's already watermarked paid, and there's the second payment that already came over. Like magic. Let's go back to the integrator and let's talk about purchase orders. Okay, on the sync dropdown, we want to see if there's any new suppliers that we need to send over. And actually, I'm going to jump into Teesom, create a new supplier so that they appear here. So I'm going to pause this real quick. Okay, I just created a new supplier. So I'm going to click on Sync Supplier. And we're going to hit on Search. And as you can see, these are all the suppliers that I've already linked up with, but there's one right here that I just created called Ink Master that's never been sent over to QuickBooks So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And notice it says double click item in the list below to edit. So double click on it. Again, we may want to search to make sure it's not already in Teesom. So click on the search option. And we have Think Actionware, we have Total Ink Solutions. Those are neither of what I'm looking for. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit send. And we'll jump over to QuickBooks and we'll go to vendors. And like magic, we're going to look up ink, and there's Ink Master. Ink Master, all the information I just put in. And now we're going to send the purchase order over. So I'll click back over. And actually, my purchase order is not for Ink Master. I'm going to click on the export button. I'll click on purchase orders. And again, same thing, I can put in specific PO date, or not a date range, but a number range. I can say what the status is. I can say, did I send it to the supplier or not send it to the supplier? But pretty much you're just going to leave this on all. And then the most important one is here, not sent to QuickBooks. And I want to get the list. Okay, so I have 2 purchase orders here for Alpha. And I have one that is at the closed status and one that's at the open status. If I would come up here and say, show me only open ones and say get list, you'd only see the one that's open. But we'll put this back to all and say get list, and you see both of them. All right, I'm going to select both to send over and send to QuickBooks. And it's doing its little thing. And boom, both POs are now sent to QuickBooks. I'm going to click back over on QuickBooks. I'll click on vendors again, and let me get rid of the search that I had done here, and let's go to Alpha. And I think it's under Alpha Broder. Sorry. It's under Alpha Broder, and we're looking for Teesom purchase order numbers, and today's 11/26, so boom, there is the purchase order that I just did today, and then the one was, the other one was the one right above it from the 18th. We can open the purchase order, and we can see here's all the apparel category, and this is going to the cost of goods side. So this is what I actually paid for the items. I had 15, appear 15, each of them were 1001, which came out to 150.15, etc., etc. And that's now my purchase order that I can use to pay the bill that I'm going to get from Alpha. So I'm going to ultimately want to marry the purchase order up with the bill that I create in QuickBooks so that I'm actually paying for what I received. Okay, we sent over both of our purchase orders. We also sent over an invoice. We sent over a customer payment. We actually sent over 2 payments. And then we also linked or synced some customers and a supplier. The only thing I haven't talked to you about is the window option. Every time I click on one of these options, it's opening a window. And if I come over here, this is just an easy way to switch back to the window that I already had open. So hope this explanation and this showing you how to set up the integration has been helpful to you. Please let us know if there's anything else that we can further explain for you. And as always, we're happy to walk you through this. Thanks so much for watching.